The mass shooting in Maine that left 18 people dead. The search for the suspect continues. Meanwhile, renewed focus has been put on the state's gun laws, which don't require background checks, but do allow permitless carry. So for more on this story, we've reached Michael Rocque. He's an associate professor of sociology at Bates College, which is still currently under lockdown as the manhunt continues. He's also a researcher on gun policy and criminology. Michael, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we are going to zero in on the gun laws in a moment, but first, of course, you are in Lewiston, where this tragedy took place. And in fact, you're also trying to help the students who are coping with this lockdown situation. How are you, the community, the students that you're trying to help, how is everyone holding up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, we're in the midst of it. You know, I just heard police vehicles racing by in the background. On my way in here, there was a convoy of armored vehicles, lights flashing. You know, we haven't really had time, I don't think, to sort of sit back and let this sink in. And we're in the midst of trying to figure out, when is this going to end? Is it going to end? At the same time, Bates has been in lockdown since Wednesday night. And so the students are not able to sort of make connections. Simple things like being able to get food. You know, some do not feel safe to go to our dining hall. And so, you know, I've been reaching out and asking how I can help. I've been reaching out to the students. One thing that is useful for the administration is to have people volunteer to deliver food to dorms. And so that's why I'm here. Otherwise, we would be urged to stay off campus.
Well, I'm sure many students are very grateful to you and the other volunteers who are able to do that. What a terrifying situation, certainly, to be in, given that it's been since Wednesday night. The school remains in lockdown, along with so many other facilities. Now, another part of your expertise, aside from the fact that you are where all of this is happening, is looking in at the sort of gun laws that exist within this state. In the aftermath of this mass shooting, there's a lot of gun safety groups that are talking about Maine's gun laws, saying they're just too lax. So maybe you can start by giving us an overview of what currently exists right now in the state.
Yeah, so Maine, in terms of other states in the United States, ranks very low in terms of their restrictive nature of the gun laws. Like you said, we do not have universal background checks. We do not require permits to purchase guns. If you're over 21, you can carry a concealed weapon. If you're 18 to 20, you need to have a permit unless you were in the military, you know, so on and on and on. We don't have what's called a red flag law. We do have a sort of a compromise law that we call a yellow flag law. But other than that, we really don't have very much in the way of gun laws. And so that has become a focus of much discussion. You know, could some of these laws been used to prevent this horrible tragedy? And, you know, part of my research, as you mentioned, it makes it surreal to have been spending years studying mass shootings, and now it's, you know, in my community. But one of the things that we've studied is, you know, gun policies and their relationship to mass public shootings. This was a mass public shooting. And we have found that there are certain things that can work, you know, requiring permits to purchase weapons seems to work in terms of reducing the number of mass public shootings. And, you know, things like large capacity magazine bans seem to reduce the casualty toll when these attacks happen. So there are things that we know can be effective that Maine just hasn't put into place.
And we certainly know that, to your point, there are a lot of those sort of requirements that exist in other states that don't exist right now in Maine. Also, when we're talking about high-capacity magazines, a ban on that, that's not something that's there. But you touched on red flag laws, too. Can you explain what those are and how you think that might have made an impact here?
Yeah, these are also sometimes called extreme risk protection orders. A red flag law is basically a situation where somebody in a person's family or their immediate social circle can invoke this red flag. They can talk to the courts and say that there's a person who they're worried about who has made threats to themselves or to someone else, and the court can make it a designation whether it makes sense to temporarily confiscate that individual's weapon. So that's a red flag law, a little bit easier to implement than what we have, which is a yellow flag law that that cannot be invoked by a family member, has to be initiated by law enforcement. And then there's a petition to the court. And then there is the requirement for a mental health professional to weigh in and make an assessment as well. So there's added layers. People who are opposed to gun restrictions argue that this is a useful sort of compromise because it provides a little bit of due process, but it does at least allow some sort of protection to ensure that people who have some intention to do harm and have these mental health crises have guns taken away from them, at least for the time being.
Now, Michael, this is reportedly the deadliest mass shooting in the U.S. so far this year. 18 people killed, 13 people injured. Manhunt continues right now for the suspect. I'm wondering, after every single mass shooting that occurs in the United States, there certainly is a conversation about gun legislation, about what could have prevented such a tragedy from occurring. What do you foresee in the conversation in the aftermath? Once you're, as you say, not in it anymore, what do you think that conversation is going to look like surrounding gun legislation in Maine?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this with colleagues and friends, the idea that once a mass shooting happens, there's this national conversation. And then in the United States, we move on in a day or two to the next big story. And then the conversation dies. And I think it's up to us in Maine, where this has happened, to keep that conversation going. I am heartened by the remarks made by one of our congressmen, Jared Golden, who is from Lewiston, who went to Bates. And he has been opposed to banning of any type of weapon. And he said that he made a mistake and he regrets that decision, and he is in support of an assault weapons ban. So that leads me to think that, there is some traction. Maine is a place that tends to try to compromise and come to sort of solutions. And so I think we are unique in that way. And so my hope is that this conversation continues and we find some common ground to help protect one another, and something that we can all agree on that is appropriate and necessary, and also respects the rights of other people who have not done anything wrong.
Well, Michael, I certainly hope that your community and yourself remain safe as this manhunt continues. We appreciate you having this discussion with us.